Raise the flag.
Light the cauldron. We declare the game's Odyssey open.
Welcome to the Games Odyssey podcast, your home for stories of glory from the Olympics and Paralympics. I'm Jonathan Jordan.
And I'm Sarah Patton. We both love the Olympics and Paralympics, and we love history. And most of all, we love Olympic and Paralympic history, which is why we are on a journey through all of the Olympic and Paralympic games, from the ancient Olympics held at Olympia all the way to now.
And last time we talked about the London 1908 Olympic Games, where figure skating made its Olympic debut 16 years before the Winter Olympics would become a thing. Today, figure skating is one of the most popular and most watched events during the Winter Games, for better or worse, and its champions often become instant sports royalty. Which is why today we're talking about the first ever gold medalist in women's figure skating, the legend and original skating icon, Madge Syers of Great Britain, who won 2 medals in London 1908 after breaking the ice ceiling in the world of figure skating and securing her place as the latest member of Club Kyneska. All right, Sarah, had you ever heard of Madge before we started putting this episode together?
You know, I feel like in all my nerdy Olympic research, I feel like her name was vaguely familiar, probably from stumbling across her in a book. Mm-hmm. But I honestly did not know much about her at all. And especially what we'll talk about, that, you know, she was a 2-time medalist at those games and just how much of an impact she had. So I think I heard her name a few times, maybe have seen a picture, but no, I did not know much about her. What about you?
Yeah, no, I knew nothing about her. In fact, in our plan for all the podcast episodes, I didn't originally have her down to discuss because I had never heard of her. It was really only from researching the 1908 games when I started looking more into her story that I said to myself, we need to give Madge an episode all her own, because her story is really, really interesting. So I'm really excited to get to share her story with all of our listeners today, more than anything else. And tell you what, before we get into talking about her, I do want to kind of detour a little bit for a second, because we were just talking about this, but I have been spending some time recently on Reddit and have discovered there's a really big Olympics and Paralympics community on there. Now, Sarah, I think you just told me you've been on Reddit some as a lurker. Did I say that correctly?
Yes. Like, I have the app downloaded.
Yeah.
I'm going to out myself. I'm a big Survivor fan. So, and on a side note, I feel like from social media I've gathered, there is a huge overlap between Survivor fans and Olympic and Paralympic fans. And yeah, I'm totally hijacking this, Jonathan.
That's fine.
In the fall, there will be a new season of Survivor in the US, because there are versions. There's Australia, South Africa. And I've connected with Australian fans who love the Olympics and Paralympics and Survivor Australia. But anyway, in the fall, in the US, there's going to be a Paralympic athlete who is on Survivor, and I cannot wait to watch it. So that's my side note. We'll talk about that probably in a few months, but so because of Survivor, I've been a lurker. I think I have a username that was generated for me. I hope I never have to log back in. I might just go create a new account, because it sounds like you're having so much fun on Reddit. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been really cool interacting with other Olympics and Paralympics fans on there and talking about the history of the games and then current events happening. So if any listeners out there are on Reddit, we are now on there as well as Games Odyssey, and I purposely designed the avatar to look like Pierre de Coubertin. So we might have to throw that avatar up on the Instagram so people can share in the joy of
looks
the
pretty
creation.
good.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself, honestly, for the design. But yeah, so really cool community on there. So you can track us down there. And if you've been looking for a place to dialogue with a lot of other Olympic and Paralympic fans, it's happening there. I was scared to get on Reddit, honestly, and I've been having a lot of fun on there. But anyway, we'll get back on track now instead of talking about social media and Survivor and everything
you're
in
welcome.
between. Yeah, I've you know what? I've literally only watched one season of Survivor. It was the second season. It was the one that was in Australia back in 2000,
Yep.
which,
Tina.
of course, the Sydney
Tina
Games.
and Kobe.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's literally the only season of the show I ever watched. So it's been a minute.
I'm going to speak this into existence. We need to do a podcast episode about Survivor players who have been in the Olympics or Paralympics.
Okay.
Yeah, in recent memory, Elizabeth Beisel was on Survivor a few years ago, and she went pretty far. And then Crystal Cox, who was an Olympian, she was in Gabon, which was one of the seasons. So yeah, I could just ramble, but yeah, maybe that's something that we do in the future when we, get through all the Olympic Games, but we have nothing else to talk about. Yeah. But if you're a Survivor fan, please connect with me because I'm telling you, there's an overlap and I want to know why. I don't know if it's just the competition. I don't know if it's just, I don't know what it is, but there seems to be a big overlap.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And I'm also going to say Katie Eulander, the 5-time skeleton winter Olympic athlete. She's on the Survivor. She's on the Survivor crew.
Oh,
she spends her off season in Fiji filming Survivor. Follow her on Instagram. She posts very pretty things. So
that's crazy. Okay, yeah, I would not have dreamed of that overlap. So anyway. Yeah. So I know I said we were getting back on track and we did not. We got way off the rails there. But yeah, let's get back to talking about Madge Syers and, figure skating. So, we have talked about this a little bit before that we both like figure skating. And, it's one of the sports I always make sure during the Winter Games to set aside time to follow, whether it's the team event and even ice dancing. I enjoy watching. As far as all the different types of figure skating events go, Sarah, which one tends to grab your attention the most? Pairs, singles?
Ooh, that's a good question. I really like pairs just because I'm always blown away by some of the stuff that they do. But I think that growing up in the 90s with Tara Lipinski and Michelle Kwan, I think I'm inclined to say the women's individual. But I mean, it's fun to watch all of it. It's because we're also coming off of 2022 where Nathan Chen just was a rock star. So I loved watching him. So, maybe it depends on the Olympic cycle, but as a 90s kid, I gotta say probably the women.
Yeah. And, they probably tend to get a little bit more attention nowadays than the men do. And we're going to get into this a little bit in the episode, how that shift has happened, because figure skating did not start out that way at all. So I think that's a pretty good segue for us to be able to talk about Madge's story and how she opened the door for all of these wonderful female figure skaters that we all love watching today. So I'm going to kick it off or kick it over to you to tell us a little bit about her background.
All right. So Florence Madeline Cave, later known as Madge to her friends, was born on September 16th, 1881 in Kensington, London, to her parents, Edward Jarvis Cave and Elizabeth Ann Cave. She was number 10 of 15 children in her family.
Holy cow.
Though another source said it was 12. So once you have that many kids, we can see how it might get hard to count. So I guess cheaper by the dozen. I don't know.
Yeah, math is hard.
It is. But they had a lot of kids, and she was number 10. So she was pretty far down the line.
Yeah.
Her father, Edward, worked as a builder, but one source called him a disgraced and bankrupt property developer. Apparently, he was terrible with money and ended up doing some shady deals, which eventually caught up to him. It looks like his financial and reputational ruin may not have happened until around 1901, when Madge was an adult and out on her own, so his financial ruin probably didn't really affect her directly. That same source also said that genealogical records have proven that her father also had a second family where he also had 10 children with his mistress Pauline. In fact, when Madge's mother Elizabeth died in May of 1909, he waited only a month of quote unquote mourning before marrying Pauline. So, yeah, he sounds like a great influence. He got around.
Yeah. I mean, you have to wonder back then, did they know what was going on, or was he really good at hiding it? But I mean, a secret family with 10 kids, I mean, how do you hide that? Maybe it's a good thing I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, something. Yeah, before the age of social media, there's some things maybe just best not to know. Regardless of his shadiness, though, his income and connections allowed for Madge to grow up as a member of aristocratic society, which introduced her to sports at a young age. And she proved to be quite the athlete, showing talent in both swimming and equestrianism. As she entered her teens, ice skating started to become a popular social activity in Victorian England. And in 1896, a skating venue was opened in Knightsbridge, known as Princess Skating Club. And 15-year-old Madge became a regular and discovered she excelled at skating. So that's pretty cool to be able to find out you're really good at a new sport to try.
Yeah, absolutely. A fun fact I discovered while doing the research for this episode is that figure skating actually gets its name because when it was first organized as a sport, it was focused on skating figures. That's right, making figures on the ice with the blades. So circles, figure eights, hearts, question marks. You get the idea. And it makes me wonder if we need a modern version called emoji skating. But I don't know. Maybe that's going too far. Anyway.
But I did know that in terms of like figure skating. And I feel like there's times that I've heard people analyze ice skating by talking about the marks they leave on the ice. But usually it goes right over my head. So I don't know. I guess I need to research that, do certain skills still leave a certain desired mark. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. But I don't know. I just never put those two things together. And then once I read it, it was kind of a duh moment of, well, of course, that's why it was called that. But I just, you learn something new every day. It was just one of those moments. Anyway, in the 1860s, so we're kind of rewinding here for a second, but in the 1860s, a New York ballet dancer by the name of Jackson Haynes started to make a name for himself by pioneering a style of skating that looked like dancing. So he combined skating with ballet to create what we would think of as figure skating today. In fact, he invented some of the spins that are still used in the sport to this day. Now, poor Jackson Haynes, he was mocked in the US for this new style, but you know who loved it? Europeans. So his style ended up becoming known as the international style of figure skating, which, again, this was all new information for me, but sounds like maybe you have a little bit better sense of the history than I did.
I mean, not much more. I just knew it had to do with figures on the ice. So this story about Jackson was new to me before reading about this episode. I guess in some ways he was ahead of his time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like he was setting the standard before the rest of the world really caught on. So, we can kind of point back to him as being the person who gave us what we think of as figure skating versus just making shapes on the ice.
Anyway, back to Madge.
Yes.
So in 1899, She was noticed by Edgar Syers, a figure skater and coach at the Princess Club, who noticed that she took the sport more seriously than her peers. She was naturally competitive, not just treating it as a fun diversion. Seeing this, plus her natural talent, Edgar decided to coach her and foster her talent. He was also a widower, so with no one to go home to, he really seems to have given all of his attention to figure skating and, well, Madge. So some people might see where this is going.
Yeah, there's a little bit of creep factor here, honestly, but but we're gonna have to get over that.
Now, Edgar was not a fan of the English style of figure skating, which tended to be very rigid in its style. Instead, he loved what was called the international style, known for its free and flowing movements. And he encouraged Madge to take on this style in her training too. He felt like this style would be the future of the sport, and, well, he was not wrong.
Nope.
Even though Edgar was 18 years older than her, so, there's that.
Yep.
They decided to enter the first ever pairs figure skating competition in Berlin in 1900. There, they managed to place second. And then in June of that year, they got married. So she became Madge Syers.
Yeah, I mean, again, a little bit of creep factor in there, but I mean, she was 18. She was on her own by that point, could make that decision, but so who am I to judge, I suppose.
Well, and we also know that people got married a lot younger. I mean, we know he was older, but right now in 2022, 18-year-olds getting married seems really, really rare, but not, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying that this should be the norm. What I am saying, though, is that I feel like she probably had marriage on her mind as an 18-year-old more than I probably did as an 18-year-old, and wanting to grow up and all of that stuff. Does that make sense?
No,
I want to be clear. I'm not saying that that stuff is great, but also understanding the different time period.
Yeah, different time, different culture, different norms. What I took away from this was the fact that she was a teenage skating star, right? So again, we were just talking about some of the things going on with the ISU and the change in age that just got implemented. And, here you have her learning skating at 15 years old, but then here at the end of her 17th year, doing really well in a skating competition, and then, being fully competitive at the age of 18. So, again, we're seeing some similarities to practices that are still happening today, which I thought was interesting. So while they enjoyed that success as a pair, Madge truly excelled as an individual, but there just weren't really many opportunities for her to compete as an individual because at that time, figure skating was considered a man's sport. But honestly, all sports were considered men's sports back then. So yeah, that was pretty much par for the ice rink, so to speak. Also, an interesting note on pairs figure skating that I found during this research. At this time, it was apparently not uncommon to not only see male-female pairings when you could have them, since there were so few women doing the sport, but you would also see male-male and female-female pairings in pairs figure skating. Now, part of that's because they weren't doing any crazy lifts yet, like what we're used to today. That, of course, would have just been outright scandalous. And there was very little stylistic difference between men and women's figure skating back then. But still, it was worthy to note that pairs figure skating could look a little bit different back then than what we're used to. And then, of course, you mentioned 1896 earlier. And we all know that the first modern Olympiad was hosted in 1896. But, Sarah, you know what else was hosted for the first time that same year?
Tell us.
The World Figure Skating Championships.
That is interesting. That was news to me to put those in the same year.
Yeah, I would not have expected that either. So again, we're just kind of learning along with everyone else here. In 1902, the World Championship was coming to Madge's hometown of London. But this was known as a men's only event because, again, it was 1902 and pretty much everything was a men's only event still.
But like her Olympic forebear Kainiska, Madge found a loophole. The rules did not specifically bar women from entering. So I think that you can guess what she did next. She showed up in all of her female glory to the World Championships. And at first, it appears that some of the judges wanted to ban her. But then upon consulting the rulebook, they discovered she was right. Their own rulebook had let them down. So they had to let her. But more on that later.
Yeah, I love that story so much that she realized, wait a second, here it doesn't say that women can't compete, so I'm just gonna sign up anyway. I love her boldness to just confidently do that in a time when I'm sure that would have just been, shocking.
Yeah, but like as with so many other sports or certain sporting events, like it took a woman just showing up and being like, well, it's not in the rules, so
yeah,
let's change it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Boston Marathon comes to mind of like, I think it was a similar story. So, and we can talk about that later. But
I'm actually currently reading the book Marathon Woman by Catherine Switzer, and she talks about that, how when she entered the Boston Marathon, that, there was no rule specifically saying that a woman couldn't be in the race because, frankly, they just assumed that women couldn't run that distance, right? So there's definitely some parallels here with Madge's story and just entering. But anyway, so she's entered, but what happened at the competition?
Madge ended up winning silver. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Second only to the famous Ulrich Salchow of Sweden, who dominated figure skating at the time and for whom the Salchow jump is named. So the Salchow jump, like if you've watched figure skating, you've heard this name.
Yeah.
I heard this name, not knowing much about this guy. It said that the many people who attended actually thought that Madge should have won. And it's also said that Salchow himself actually offered his gold medal to her because of how impressed he was by her performance. So good on him.
Yeah.
Way to be a good sport.
Yeah.
To put this in perspective, how big a deal it was for her to show up at this competition, English women over the age of 21 were not given the right to vote until 1928. So this was really a brave decision on her part.
Yeah, and to kind of get back to our guy Ulrich here, it really seems that many men actually welcomed the addition of women into the sport. And according to one source that I found, it said, quote, engaging socially with women in public was still seen as quite a novelty, and the male competitors welcomed more opportunities to do so. But my question is, did all men feel that way?
Of course not. What a dream, but of course not. While the competitors overall seemed to be pretty cool with her competing against them, it should come as no surprise that it was the male decision makers who had a problem.
Of course.
Madge's performance caused the International Skating Union to basically freak out and discuss the issue of whether women should compete against men when they had their annual Congress in 1903.
Yeah, and after this discussion that they had when they freaked out, they came up with a list of perfectly reasonable concerns, which, if you can't hear it, that's a lot of sarcasm right there, okay? So here are their list of concerns. First, how can the judges effectively see the feet of the competitor when they are wearing a dress? Completely unsolvable problem, obviously. Two, what if a judge was romantically interested in a female competitor? This could compromise their ability to be unbiased, because we know how important it's always been to be unbiased in figure skating, right? We've never seen bias enter into the equation.
Never.
Yeah.
So glad that they were concerned about fairness.
Right. And finally, their big third concern was they were just concerned that, hey, you simply can't compare men to women. And I don't know what else to say about that one.
So, to try to address their concerns, Madge actually started a fashion trend by wearing calf-length dresses so that judges could clearly see her footwork. But even so, the all-male Congress of the ISU voted 6-3 to bar women from entering the championships.
Yeah. So, here she is being a fashion icon to try to fit into their concerns and make sure she's abiding by the rules. And even so, we got 6 guys saying no. But hey, I mean, there were 3 in there who seemed okay with it. I mean, I guess that's not the I'm actually a little impressed that there were that many who were okay with it at the time.
Yeah, I'm grateful for those 3.
Yeah. So speaking of, one of the ISU delegates who had voted in favor for the inclusion of women was this guy by the name of G.H. Fowler. And he decided to actually write his own statement about why these 3 concerns were totally unfair. So in his words, quote, that the dress prevents the judges from seeing the feet. To this we answer that it is impossible to skate figures properly in a long dress. The dress must be short. So, yeah, right off the bat, he's like, this reason is crap. We can just throw it out the window. Yeah. Next, he said that a judge might judge a girl to whom he was attached. We reply that if a man were so little of an honorable sportsman as to be willing to judge in this case, his association would certainly not permit it. So, in other words, he's saying if that were to happen, then obviously there would be consequences for showing that kind of bias, and you would deal with that situation. And then finally, he said that it is difficult to compare women with men. We respond that the woman must be judged in every respect exactly as a man is judged. So in other words, he's saying the same rules should just apply. The idea that one would be judged in a different way and you would change the rules somehow based on their sex is just ridiculous. So, you know what? Bravo, G.H. Fowler. Bravo for your logic.
Indeed. And that his solutions were just simple.
Yeah.
Or that his statements were simple. Like, I wonder if in his head he was like, oh my gosh, these morons, like, get over yourselves. So yeah, I'm with you. We like him. So, undaunted by the ISU's new sexist manifesto, Madge focused her attention elsewhere. So in 1903, she won the first British figure skating championships, which started as a mixed competition, very progressive for them at the time, and she won. Who came in second? Her own husband, Edgar. Meanwhile, the National Ice Skating Association was lobbying the ISU to allow female figure skaters, and in 1905, they rescinded their No Girls Allowed policy by creating a separate women's singles competition. They called this the Ladies' Championship instead of the World Championship, though, and they held it both on a different day and different venue. So they were making changes, kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
Very reluctant.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. The first of these ladies' championships was held in 1906 in Switzerland, where there were 5 competitors, with Madge, unsurprisingly, taking first. She would successfully defend her title in Vienna the next year.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, they're making changes, kicking and screaming, not even giving it the status of a world championship, making sure that it's held on a different day, a different place. Mm-hmm. But at least they are putting their stamp of approval that women can compete in their own category. And of course, yeah, there were only 5 competitors. But again, this is more about opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's no surprise that the first competition is not going to have a ton of people. But when that happens, people take note and they inspire. And I mean, obviously, it took off.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to see that start to change really, really quickly here. But tell you what, let's take a quick little break and then we will come back and continue Madge's story and see where she goes from here now that women finally can compete officially on the world stage. All right, so while Madge was racking up some trophies for herself, it was announced that the Olympic Games would be moved to London, which of course we talked about in our 1908 episode. And it was announced that these games would include figure skating for the first time. So Madge and Edgar set their sights on attending the games, of course. I mean, it's in their hometown. Why not, right? In fact, talk about a home field advantage. The competition was scheduled to be held at the Prince's Skating Club, where Madge had learned to skate and where she had met Edgar. The singles competition, furthermore, was going to be made up of 2 parts, kind of like today, but at this time it was called the compulsory skate and the free skate. So I don't know. I thought that was really interesting that back in its very beginning of the sport, they were splitting it up into 2 pieces like that for the judging.
Yeah. And also just like a note about the competition being held at their skating club. I mean, this was like their destiny.
Yeah.
Everything was kind of coming together. This was meant to be.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So the 4th Olympiad London 1908 official report, written by Theodore Cook, stated that Madge Syers was, quote, in a class all her own, as all 5 judges placed her first in both the compulsory and the free skates. So just first place across the board, no question. I mean, that's pretty fantastic. You would not see that happen today, obviously, but still. Oh, which, by the way, so, we're talking about her obviously being the first, female gold medalist for figure skating, but the first men's gold medalist in figure skating was none other than our guy, Ulrich Salchow. So here we...
So happy for him. He deserves that.
But anyway, kind of moving on from her success there, she and Edgar also entered the pairs event. Now, there were only 3 pairs entered, so they were guaranteed a medal no matter what, and they ended up winning bronze. But what's interesting about this is that Edgar Syers, to this day, is still the oldest figure skater to win an Olympic medal. So... that's something.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you remember how old he was at the Olympics?
Oh gosh. Let's see. When they met, he was 36 because he was 18 years older than her, and that was in 1899. So we've got to add 9 years to that. So he would have been 45. Am I doing that math right?
All right. I just Googled. You'll be happy to know that your math was correct.
Yes.
Yep. He was 45.
Cool.
So I wonder if that record will be broken. I don't know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it could be, but I mean, I don't know. I'm 37 and I feel like things are falling apart. So, and I don't train to the level that these athletes do. So I think that it would be hard to see a man at 45 winning an Olympic medal, but who knows? Maybe so.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine it. I feel like it's rare to see someone in their 30s now at the Olympics, especially in skating.
Well, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So if it's like we're already struggling to have someone in the 30s.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Surprisingly, Madge retired from competitive skating after the 1908 games, but this appears to be due to health problems that were beginning to make competing difficult for her. The details on this are a bit vague in the research, but that's also because the medical field was still pretty vague too. So they just may not have known what was wrong with her or how to treat it, just a prescription of deal with it. But whatever the problem was, she didn't feel she could safely compete anymore, so she went out on top.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to go out, I guess that's the way to do it. And frankly, I mean, how many female figure skating champions do we see do exactly the same thing now?
Right.
Still, Madge didn't completely leave the world of figure skating. She and Edgar wrote 3 books together, 2 about skating, and a third one, a poetry book about skating. Now, the 2 books about skating, as far as the sport goes, were titled The Book of Winter Sports, which was published in 1908. So 1908 was a very productive year for them, I suppose. And then the second one was called The Art of Skating International Style, which was published in 1913. And that book actually featured pictures of her and Edgar actually demonstrating different techniques. So I'm sure if they were still around today, they'd have a whole TikTok and YouTube channel devoted to skating tutorials. They were pioneers in using visual media to teach people, which is pretty cool, I think.
That is cool.
Now, we have to talk about this poetry book, though. The poetry book that they worked on together was called The Poetry of Skating, being a collection of verses by various hands commending and describing that graceful art. Obviously, the easiest title to remember in the world. So,
Yep, I need to read that book. Or maybe we can get you reading some of the poetry, just like you read Coubertin's Ode to Sport.
I think that was a one-time thing.
And you did so great. In their first book, she wrote, many English women have become remarkably proficient, equal, indeed, to any but the very best of the other sex. Skating is an exercise particularly appropriate for women. It requires not so much strength as grace, combined with a fine balance and the ability to move the feet rapidly. In these qualifications, a woman has often the advantage, particularly in our own country, as Englishmen are usually inclined to be rather slow and heavy skaters.
Dang, Madge.
I am here for it.
Yeah, that is a serious burn for an ice skater. I don't know. I love that quote so much.
Oh, yeah, she knew.
Yeah, I just think it's so funny that she went out of her way to make that point and to talk about how, hey, we can do this too. This is not a problem. So,
oh yeah, she absolutely knew what she was doing.
Yeah,
I feel like thinking about that time in history, I feel like she would have been part of the suffrage movement.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe she was, and we just don't know about it. But yeah, she definitely was, again, a pioneer in terms of advocating for women being in sports and, writing books, even promoting that idea, which is really cool. Now, okay, I guess you are going to get your wish a little bit. I am going to read an excerpt real quick of one of Edgar's poems from the poetry book. So, okay, yeah, I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously, but here is a little snippet. And this is actually a poem that Edgar wrote specifically about Madge, and he entitled it To My Lady's Skates. I don't know why he's writing to her skates. Maybe it should just be To My Lady, but whatever. To My Lady's Skates. So for your enjoyment, here we go. The praise of glove, of fan, or shoe, many full a ode relates. May not my muse, with theme more new, commend my lady's skates? Little feet to guide these blades, my mistress fair provides, and sweetest of our glacial maids on them serenely glides. Okay, now...
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Now, I'm not sure what little feet means. I actually tried to look up the Victorian meaning of F, spelled EFF, but Google kept giving me, well, the modern meaning of that word. So, yeah. So, not sure what he was going for there or what he meant, but anyway. So, talking of the whole Coubertin poem, which of course he won a gold medal for at 1912, which will be the next games we talk about. I do wonder if Edgar ever considered submitting his poetry in the artistic competition for the Olympics, or maybe he did but didn't win. I mean, he's talking about F little feet, so that may have disqualified him. So
perhaps. Back to Madge. Unfortunately, Madge's health continued to deteriorate. On September 9th, 1917, at just 35 years old, she died of heart failure due to acute endocarditis, although some sources say that she died in childbirth. I guess they could both be true, but we didn't find any record of her giving birth or any stillbirth, but I suppose it's possible.
Yeah, I did a little bit of digging on that and could not find anything. I found several sources that mentioned the childbirth thing, but they all were kind of pointing at each other. There was no definitive proof of her being pregnant and then maybe because of her health, maybe, that causing a problem. So we don't know for sure if that was the case. It just is one of those things that some people throw out there as a possible factor, I think. But I don't know. It's still sad. And I feel like we keep having these stories of, people passing away, these pioneers in the sport passing away too young. I mean, we had exactly the same thing with George Iser, where we don't know why he passed away, but he died young as well. And here we've got Madge Syers, really very young, 35 years old. That's younger than I am right now. I don't know. It's sad.
It is. It really is.
But we do need to, I guess, briefly talk about Edgar. So what was he up to after Madge passed away? Because obviously he was a big part of her story, being both her coach and her husband.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like he ever competed much after 1908. I think that was kind of their heyday, and then he really just focused on coaching after that. We do know that in 1921, so 4 years after Madge's death, he did get remarried. So this is now wife number 3 for him. His wife Ava, who was 21 at the time. So he was 58.
He has a type.
He's getting younger and younger, it seems like. You do the math. Anyway, so he actually ended up living until 1942 when he was 82 years old. And from what I could find, it appears that he died of natural causes of, being 82 years old. But that's really kind of what we know for him. So his life was devoted to ice skating, figure skating, promoting the sport, teaching the next generation. And again, creepiness factor aside, obviously he had a major impact on the sport by supporting her and encouraging her to enter these competitions, where in an age when it would have been unusual for someone's husband to say, yeah, how about you go buck the system, right?
Yeah, it does seem like they were a really good team, and that it was not one of these situations where just because he was older, he was just trying to control her, keep her in a box. Like he helped her thrive, it seems.
Yeah, from what we know, it actually seems like it was very much the opposite. He was trying to actually enable and empower her to be able to excel at her sport. So, that's commendable for the age that he was in. But yeah, let's finish, though, talking about Madge, because she's really the one we want to focus on here. And as the first female gold medalist in figure skating, what's her legacy? What can we look back on and honor her for?
In terms of her long-term legacy, Madge busted down the icy walls of figure skating in a bold way, opening the way for the next generation of female figure skaters. But she also empowered all figure skaters, regardless of their sex, with both her actions and also the books she and Edgar wrote together. In 1981, she was inducted into the World Figure Skating Hall of Fame in recognition of her accomplishments. And of course, today, figure skating is one of the most popular Olympic events, and today's Olympic champs in figure skating are considered sports royalty, especially in the women's singles event. But all of that traces back to Madge Syers as the first queen of figure skating.
Yeah, and that's a pretty awesome legacy when you think about it.
Yeah, I feel like if she could see what figure skating looks like today, especially for women, it's one of those things, like she had no idea what she was paving the way for.
Yeah, no, I mean, and who could? None of us can see the future, right? But I think we can be grateful because, you know, who knows what the sport would have looked like or where it would have gone if she hadn't decided, hey, I'm just going to show up at the World Championships and compete against the men anyway, right? I mean, it all goes back to her willingness to put herself out there like that and show that she could go toe to toe, or, you know, blade to blade, I guess I should say, with the men.
Yeah.
And that's pretty awesome. But, you know, it is too bad, again, with her dying so young, that she missed out by a few years on being able to see the arrival of a separate Winter Olympic Games. You know, in my heart, I wish she could have seen that moment. I wish she could have seen winter sports grow to the point where they needed their own venue to celebrate. So it's too bad.
It is, but we love her. And I'm glad that we decided to talk about her.
But with that, we are going to leave behind London 1908, and we're going to look forward to Stockholm 1912, which was nicknamed the Swedish masterpiece, and it's still the only time that Sweden has been host to the Olympic Games so far. So, I don't know, maybe they'll throw their hat in the ring. But that seems crazy to me that they've only hosted that one time. And Stockholm 1912 will be the last Olympic Games that we talk about in this first season. So we'll talk about the games. We will probably highlight an athlete from those games like we normally do. But that's what we're going to actually close out this first season on before we take a little bit of a break. But even so, if you enjoyed this episode,
and we really hope you did,
then we hope you'll come back next time for our discussion about Stockholm 1912. And hey, if you're on Reddit or you're not on Reddit, then you should get on there and join the really awesome community of Olympics and Paralympics fans that are there. Because seriously, it's been a lot of fun talking about the news and old stuff and history. And so yeah, surprisingly more fun and friendly than what I was expecting out of social media. But until next time, Odyssey you later. The Games Odyssey podcast is a production of Wardrobe Media, LLC. This episode was written, hosted, produced, and edited by Jonathan Jordan and co-hosted by Sarah Patton. Show notes, including research sources and transcripts, can be found on our website, gamesodyssey.com. Olympic is a trademark of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, USOPC. Any use of Olympic in the Games Odyssey podcast is strictly for informational, commentary, and educational purposes. The Games Odyssey podcast is not an official podcast of the USOPC and is not sponsored, endorsed, or officially affiliated with the USOPC or the International Olympic Committee or International Paralympic Committee. The content of Games Odyssey podcast does not reflect the opinions, standards, views, or policies of the USOPC, and the USOPC in no way warrants that content featured in the Games Odyssey podcast is accurate.